So I hope you enjoyed yesterday's video from Little River. A bit of fun, a lot of wind, like a hell of a lot of wind, but as you could hear it on the camera and see the actual scope, the spotting scope shaking so much. But it was definitely testing. Overall, amazing results. A couple of things happened that threw me off a little bit, and then I sat through, and this is the beauty about logging everything you do. You can always go back and read what you've done, and most of the time, or we'll say most of the time, it'll make sense. So overall, most of the groups were fantastic in the lower powder charge and in the higher powder charge as well. And we definitely found out that the rifle likes 15th thou off the lands better than it likes 20 or 10. So that's a really good result knowing that. But some of the standard deviation readings were a little high. And I was racking my brain of how could I, the groups are amazing. And then when I looked at my data of what I'd used, I'd actually mixed in some brand new cases along with some first fired. So slightly different neck tension, that's going to throw your standard deviation out the window. But the good thing is that the powder charge was so good and the seating depth was so good, and sitting off the lands at the right amount was enough to keep a really consistent group, especially in that kind of wind. So that's a win-win. Let's go through some of the data. So let's look at the first three groups here. Now, a reasonable standard deviation on the first group at 20 thou. This is the 21.6 powder charge. So this is the low end node. Okay, and most of our speeds were around the 2,600 feet per second. Now, when we go to the 15th thou off, we had a much better group, but the standard deviation was a lot less. But if you notice there's one speed that's right out there, actually two, 2597 and 2581 as opposed to 2600. They were the new cases. So that's what threw that out. But let's have a look at the groups. So as you can see, it's quite an open group there at 20 thou off. Now this is 15 thou, much tighter. So the rifle's really loving that 15 thou off the lands there. And when we went a little closer to the lands, it started opening up again. So that tells us that it didn't like it. So 15 thou for this powder charge it is. So what do? We test again. So we had another group there at the 21.6 powder charge. This is the 20 thou off. Very respectable group, mind you. It's 0.8 of an inch. Every little one of those squares is half an inch in the Hornady targets. So very respectable. Now here's the 15th thou off the lands. If you have a look at that, apart from that one flyer, that's quite an amazing group. If it wasn't for that flyer, that group would be 0.4 or 0.5 of an inch. So very impressive. Now here's the 23 grain powder charge at 15 thou off the lands. That's a 0.6 group. In high winds like we had, that's fantastic. Very, very pleased with that. Now here's the 10th thou off the lands, which is very respectable. Even though I had that one flyer and brought the group out to 1.4, that's still very respectable. But I do believe that the 15th thou was just that little bit tighter in the main group, so I'm going to stick with that. I always get this question by non-shooters when they see one of my videos, and the first thing they'll say is, you didn't hit the middle, you missed. And I just look at them and I just hold back what I really want to say, but I thought I'd better explain myself a little bit. No target shooter is going to waste his time trying to zero his rifle on every test shot in the middle here. You'll drive yourself insane. Because don't forget, we're going out there, we're setting up one target. As long as it's sighted in enough to go in that square, that's all we want. Because we're not looking about hitting the center. The center's just our focus point. That's where we're aiming. It's about the group size. So wherever they end up, as long as they're around here, it's about measuring the group. Once we've finished our powder charge, our depth charge, and we have a made bullet that we know that that's what we're making, then we'll adjust the scope for it and take a reading to make sure it hits the center. I hope you understand it now. So the question now is, what powder charge do you go with? Do you go with the 21 grain and save on some gunpowder, or do you go with the 23? Well, actually, the answer is very simple. We go with the 23, and I'll tell you why. At the 21 grain, our speeds were around 2,600 feet per second. So they were as low as 25,950 to 2625, somewhere there. So let's call it, 2,600 feet per second. At 23 grain, we're at 2,800 feet per second. So it's a no-brainer. And especially for when we want to shoot further, when we start going out to 200, 300, 400 meters, that's going to benefit us immensely because we're going to have less drop when we hit the other end. So 23 it is. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you on the next one.